Are there any rules to art or just your own aesthetics? G'day mate, and how the bloody hell are you? Welcome to In the Back of My Head podcast, episode 89. It's a creative journal where I rant and ramble on about creativity, about whatever's in the back of my head, try and sort out some shit, try and make sense of what I'm thinking, clear some space, make room for some new bullshit. If you get anything out of it, bloody brilliant. If not, hey, don't worry about it. I've been thinking a lot about rules that we set for ourselves as creatives, and not rules as in like deadlines or regiments, schedules, or perhaps moral rules that you might set yourself, such as would you use AI or would you sample an artist's work without telling anybody, something like that. I'm not talking about those rules. What I'm talking about is the aesthetic rules that we hear from others and that we also come up with ourselves through lessons that we learn and then solidify them in our brains through the way that we speak to ourselves. I was very fortunate that when I was growing up in a very creative town, I got to hang out with a lot of older musicians and study music at my local high school. I met a lot of older musos, be they actual players or be they sound professionals at various pubs and venues that I got to either work at or just be around fairly frequently. Also, having worked at my mum's music shop that she was running, again, goddamn fortunate for that, met a lot of older musicians. Older as in 40 years old, 40 plus. And to a young teenage boy, they had some wise words to impart upon me, to try and guide me, or perhaps, and most, I assume was in a guiding fashion. But I also believe that when we give guiding advice, especially to younger people, that we are often really just reconciling with our own choices and trying to not fool ourselves, but massage the truth that no, we know what we're doing. We know the path that we're on. We know that we've made some excellent choices. And when you're young and impressionable, those wise words become rules in your head that you follow, knowing that this person seems to still be doing it. They were doing it, and they were following these rules, so I should follow those rules, and I will too do the thing. Make the music, have some sort of career. I'm going to put career in big old quotation marks right there. Because I was around musos, I got a lot of advice around equipment and techniques. That was the most common. I think it is the most common because it's very easy to just throw out, this one, use this, and everything will be fucking sweet, mate. And it is good to get that kind of advice from people who have been doing things for a long time, been in the industry for a long time, to find out, hey, what's your go-to microphone? What's your go-to mastering suite? Or mastering engineer that I should go to and get my stuff mastered by, of which I've never gotten my stuff mastered. Maybe I did actually for my very first EP. Yeah, because we won the Battle of the Bands, we got it mastered professionally. Still was shit because our recording and mixing was garbage. But you get a lot of industry standard advice of don't use anything except for an SM58 microphone on vocals on stage, which is all well and good. It's a good microphone, to be fair. It's a good microphone. Takes a hell of a beating. I think that's why it's industry standard, because you can't destroy them. I learnt what amps are good amps. I learnt what drum kits are good drum kits. I learnt what good guitars look like and sound like, and what you should be looking for when you're trying them out at the shop. All that kind of stuff. And all very useful All very, very useful. But then also there was a lot of industry standard or just personal rules that would be imparted onto me and to anyone else that would listen that I then had to unlearn over a long period of time. And I think it's funny going into something like music, I suppose any art form, but I think in particular music as a student in the past 30 years. Because anything that you're learning, technology-wise, is going to be potentially obsolete within the next 5 years. Not to say that there aren't a lot of things that carry over, and I'm also saying that, like, I learned a ton. I learned a ton from all these older musicians, and getting some baseline education in music. Bloody fortunate and glad that I did that. But there were some pieces of equipment or technology or anything like that that I would use that I would be told, no, this is the best. And I would find myself despising using those things and finding an alternative at a future date and being like, fucking hell, why in God's good name would I use that shit ever again? One that came to mind was Pro Tools. Pro Tools is a recording software, a DAW, digital audio workstation, and it was the industry standard, maybe still is the industry standard in larger studios, and I can't stand it. It's modeled after like old hardware in terms of the user interface. It has like a very retro kind of vibe to it, at least to my eyes, and workflow wise, and I find that it's super fucking good. Don't get me wrong, it's super bloody brilliant. But for the way my brain works, it never clicked. It never made any sense to me just to look at it. And I always found it very confusing to work with. Now, this was a long time ago that I did any work on Pro Tools, to be fair. But also there was a lot of their company is a very predatory company, in my mind. Though they've got kind of an Adobe feel to it in terms of how they price their products, and it just feels predatory, it feels scummy, it feels like because they're the industry standard they can get away with anything and they will milk you for all that you are worth, and I fucking hate that shit. Any subscription service on a creative piece of software I think is, I was trying to think of another word besides evil because that seems so over the top, and it is over the top, that's an exaggeration. Is it evil? I don't know, but I'm gonna call it evil. Fuck that shit. Fuck any subscription service for a creative. Actually, fuck subscription services in general. Garbage, waste of everyone's time, waste of everyone's goddamn money in the long run. So I moved on to Ableton, and Ableton clicked. Ableton made a lot more sense to me, to my brain, the way it works. And it does some things better, some things much worse, you know, there's pros and cons for any bit of software. But the mental side of it, which is the part I'm actually talking about, I'm not talking about what's better and what's worse. I don't actually really give a shit about industry standard equipment or just what equipment is better and what software is better or worse. What I do care about is the mental side of it, of like what actually works for your brain, what clicks, be it the UI, be it the workflow, be it the morality of the company itself, whatever sits nicely in your soul while you're creating your art should be the tool that you turn to. And Ableton did that for me. The way that UI was very computery. It was very, for a kid who grew up attached to a MacBook from a very young age, the way that Ableton looked just slotted perfectly into the machinery of my own head. And still to this day, it makes a lot more sense to me than various other doors that I tried. And it wasn't a subscription. It was a one-time payment. But what I'm actually talking about is the advice that people give. That people get really hung up on their opinion as law. I'm sure in every art form, I'm sure in every space, but fuck me if not in particular the music industry. And I encounter this more as a mentor for young people in music as a job, as an occasional job that I do. have learned a lot from it. And a question that I have received quite a lot is, what is the best DAW? What is the best software? What should I use? And I'm actually quite wary of, like, I teach them on Ableton, and a few of them have really taken to Ableton and seem to think like, oh, this is the good one, this is the best one. And I have to keep kind of pulling them up, saying, this doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which one you pick. I like Ableton. It works for me. And it is what we've got for that reason, because I can teach you easily on it. But if you've started on a different piece of software, then for the love of God, stick to that software. If you like it, if you like Ableton more, fucking great, switch to it. But these tools are just that, tools. And you have to just stick to the one that fits your workflow and fits your brain. And there are pros and cons of all of them. But often will I still encounter people who say, oh, you can't use that. You can't use that piece of software. You got to use this piece of software. These ones are for the big boys. These ones are for the real ones that are working in the industry. And it's often very, I would say, elitist when talking to young people. Because young people ain't got any money either. And so my advice is actually usually just like, start with a free one. Get Reaper. Reaper's free. Or there's various online ones just in your web browser that will suffice. You got an Apple MacBook? Fucking use GarageBand, mate. Use whatever's available. Use whatever's available and whatever's free, whatever's cheap, whatever is good to use, whatever is good to learn on. And then further down the path, you can take the time to learn another piece of software if need to be. I think there's far more important factors than what is quote-unquote the best or the industry standard, especially in an industry that is so dominated by technology. And not to like also discredit the idea that these things are good or that advice should be not given, because like you should give advice and you should have a strong opinion actually on what is good and what you've enjoyed and what you find actually like a functional tool. But I think when we learn lessons or learn tricks to our trade, then I think we often do a little bit of massaging of the truth to make it seem like an even grander thing that we have stumbled upon, an even grander revelation that we've stumbled upon. And that's what I've been analysing a lot in myself recently, of tips and tricks that I've figured out over however many years that I have worded. I've got a little spiel about them in my brain. Like, this is the thing, man. This is the thing that's going to take it to the next level. This is the thing that's really like going to elevate your craft. And because I got this nice little elevator pitch that I give myself about these tricks that I use on the daily, I often then don't question them nearly as much as I should. Question the use of them, question my choices around them. And so then if I ever recommend them to people, put them forward as a rule or a trick or a tip, it can be very rose-colored glasses in the way that I'm speaking about it, the way that I am advising its use. A couple of funny little ones are just recording music in a apartment, recording music in this tiny little room with a pretty cheap microphone. I've got a couple of plugins that really add a lot of texture and air. There's a plugin called Air, can't remember what it's called actually. Is it just called Air? Might just be called Air. And it adds a lot of brittleness and a lot of texture in the high end, and it makes a shitty microphone actually sound much higher end. And it is a really good little tool that I use to add a little clarity to vocals. However, I kind of worded it in my head of like, oh, with modern technology, with this plugin plus some reverb and noise removal tools, I can get like this microphone to sound real crispy, and people like crispy vocals. I like crispy vocals. All the recordings I listen to, all the hip hop that I listen to has really crispy, brittle vocals. semi-true. Only semi-true. There's a few records that really have that, but then I started to listen more closely to what I was putting out and realizing that I had gone way too far with it. Because I had worded this in my head like this is the secret sauce. And so I ended up putting out a fair bit of work that had this kind of glassy styling to it. Too brittle, too much high end. All of this air in the top end of the frequency range that does sound sort of clear, but it also sounds kind of digital, lacks warmth, lacks depth, lacks that sort of analog, raw feeling that we're all kind of looking for in our music. I do the same thing with art that I slap on a texture almost on everything, and you see this a lot in digital design, that everyone just slaps a texture on top of everything and that you call it a day. It acts as the glue, same as a saturator in music, and it does act as a glue. It does bring everything together. But when you start to treat it as a go-to, as a rule almost, that like everything you put out has to have this, otherwise to your eyes and to your ears it doesn't look complete, doesn't sound complete, doesn't sound or look professional and done, then it's so easy to overstep, to overuse it. And I did that recently with a single cover for the Bad Health single that we're putting out soon. Of the single cover, the digital one was going to have this texture to it, and I just thought, yeah, that's I do that for everything and it looks good. And then I went back to it after a couple of weeks and I took the texture off and I was like, damn, that actually looks like more intentional. That actually looks like a decision has been made rather than just slapping this thing on just to kind of add some grunge. People like grunge, people like grit, people like the roughness. Makes things feel more tangible and real rather than super crystal clear digital kind of stylings, be it music or visuals. But if there's not an intention behind it and you've just tricked yourself into thinking that you do that on everything, you have to do that on everything, it can be very easy to make things look kind of lazy and unprofessional. But we tell others about these things. We give advice. When people ask about, oh, what should I use, or how should I approach this project, or what have you, people have little rules that they have set themselves, aesthetic rules that they have set themselves that they will then impart onto you. And we are often very hyperbolic, I feel. We're hyperbolic, and so we'll put them forward as a rule. You gotta do this, you gotta do that. You see it so much in the marketing space of amateur music, and I've talked a lot about this, about just the rules that are set for us that like you have to do these things. A couple of go-tos which from two different worlds that I always found funny was you have to use hashtags, which is a very outdated way of working in the digital space on Instagram and yada yada. You have to use hashtags. If you're not using hashtags effectively, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Part of the truth. Only part of the truth. As someone who's been on Instagram and done loads of terrible marketing but put a lot of effort and time and research into it, I can tell you that like it's only half the battle. If the thing you're putting out isn't good or isn't the right stylings for the platform that you're on, then it often won't matter how well you market it. It's still not going to get anywhere. Or another one that I've encountered that I've been told, and I know other people who've been told that you must do, is you gotta hit the posters. You gotta post at the town, plaster the town with the images for your upcoming gig, which is also another one that I found kind of funny. Of if you're Tyler the Creator and you're coming to Melbourne, yeah, you gotta have posters. You gotta let the people know as part of the scheme. But I find it funny when if you're a no-name band, if you got no name in town and you put up a bunch of posters, how many hours do you spend postering the town with your face and the time and the place to go to come see you play? And everyone's like, I have no idea who that is, I'm not going to go see that. That time could be much better spent personally messaging, calling, whatever. messaging people and saying, hey, come to my gig. That will be far more, and I haven't done very much of that. I don't say this as like, I know what I'm doing at all as a marketer or as a musician. But I am saying that I've heard a lot of advice from people who are also usually just at my spot at the bottom of the industry, at just your local nobody, who will tell you, you gotta do this, mate, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, and then it'll work. And you go, is it working for you? Is any of this working? And what is working? What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve here? If you want to pack a pub, you need to have a lot of mates. Man, if you want a lot of people to come to your gig as a nobody in your town, you need to just have friends. You need to be a social person. It sucks. It's difficult. That's really annoying. But it is kind of what it is. I think you gotta be careful the way that you give advice, the way that you tell something as if it's a rule of what you have to do. And also be very careful of the rules that you hear from others when it comes to creativity, because this doesn't matter, because none of this matters. This is all make-believe. We're making it up as we go. For every failure, I've said this 1,000 times on this fucking podcast, but for every 1,000 of people who have done the tips and tricks and done all the things, there is one person who did the same shit and succeeded, and everyone else failed. There's a huge element of luck, I feel, to a lot of it, but there's also just like honesty and intention. Here's actual advice time, which I kind of feel like I rarely do. I guess the whole thing is advice, but it's also sort of, I feel like this podcast is like anti-advice. This podcast is, be careful of what you're listening to. Be careful of who you're talking to. Be careful of what thoughts are rattling in your head around creativity, because they can be very toxic and they can lead you down dumb, dark paths that just lead you nowhere, and especially don't lead you to actually putting stuff out. But I've thought a lot about what actually makes good art. What actually makes good art at a very fundamental level. What is it that people can actually see and latch onto that they actually really enjoy in the art that they consume? What are those things? And this is a hugely broad stroke, but it does, I think, contain an element of truth of how you approach the core of what you're doing. Be that marketing, be that the creative process, be that any element of putting stuff out. I think the things that people can actually see is intention and effort. In terms of effort, I'm a big fan of fast output, of finishing projects quickly, of whatever it takes to kind of get it done. I love a shortcut. I love a quick trick. But I also really enjoy the tiny little details, the nitty-gritty, the time that you spend on a piece of art that actually allows it to rise to proof, to actually find its complexity and its wholeness, its soul. Because I think we're in an interesting era, especially thanks to AI, but not just AI, just loads of different tools. Art is more accessible and quicker than ever. It is quicker to do anything in the creative space. And I love all of these things, and it does allow us to do more. And it's sort of an intangible thing, but I think people can actually see through the tricks and the tips and the shortcuts, or the AI, or when you're sampling records to make beats, whatever it is. I think the thing that people can really see is laziness. People can detect laziness really well. And I think when people are upset with art, at its core, it's usually because it lacks effort or intention. So I don't think it matters if you break all the rules that you were told and cut a lot of corners. If you're going at it with a very intentional attitude and putting in the effort where you know it's worth it. That's sort of vague, which is sort of the intention here, but if you think to the things that you see online, the content online that you see, the music online that you don't like, when you think to it, is it because they use tools that you don't like? Is it because they use techniques that you don't like? Is it because they wrote songs in ways that you don't like? Or is it because it's lazy and cookie cutter and lacking vision? It's like when you hear music that is really, really rough and raw and lacking that polish. And again, I think the audience can tell when that is an intentional outcome with the way they're approaching their work, compared to just didn't bother doing it. If you shit out art just for the sake of it, I think people can see that. People can feel that. There is an emotional reaction that you get when you hear something or see something that is just... And I've done that. I feel like I've done that, and I feel like that's my biggest crime, is that the stuff that I'm the least happy with is always the stuff that took the least effort and still got put out. And even pieces that were not well received or just kind of fell by the wayside, if there was a great deal of effort and intention, and I'm not even talking about hours put into a thing, but just a vision, some sort of actual intention and vision going into a piece, even when it falls flat in your face, feels like there was so much more soul in that and so much worth in putting that out than something just hastily thrown together for the sake of it. So me, that was all a bit vague, but I want people to be careful, and I want to be careful setting rules for myself, telling people rules, telling people ideas or tips and tricks, and the things that we listen to as if they are gospel when it comes to creativity. I don't think the goal is to put out the best work, because it's an intangible and impossible goal to create good or perfect work. But I think it's a very tangible and possible goal to just put out honest and excited work. To just follow your whimsy and to follow your excitement, to follow that childlike nature in yourself. I think especially as we head further down this path of massive convenience when it comes to creativity through new technology, then I think that is even more important, is to just put every bit of weirdness and raw essence from your soul, so wank, but into your work. Put that shit in your work. And whatever tips and tricks and rules and technology and software and hardware that you use to get from A to B with honesty and excitement and intention and vision and effort where it counts, those are the things you should be using. And the goal is always to just put stuff out, mate. Make stuff. Keep making stuff. That's today's little ramble. That's today's little how do you do about the rules that we tell ourselves, the rules we set ourselves. Hope you enjoyed this, mate. Leave a like and a comment and yada yada, share it, I don't know, do whatever feels right to you. Maybe shoot me a message with what's bothering you about creativity at the moment. How are you in your own way? Yeah, I'll catch you on the next one, mate. Be so very well.